Do you ever feel like no matter what you do to get ahead with your money, that life just keeps to seem happening and you end up going back to square one over and over and over? Well, if that's you and you want to break the discouraging cycle, today's story is going to be for you. And for our main topic, we're going to be covering HopeFilled Financial FootStep number 2, Take Control. Good morning and welcome to the HopeFilled Financial Podcast. My name is Jay Disberger, your one and only HopeFilled Financial Coach, and I'm happy that you're here with us today. Today's story starts a few years back. I was on my last internship, and you have to understand that on my internship that I had prior, which was in Dallas, Texas, I had gained like 15 or 20 pounds. So I didn't want to do the same thing when I went to Utah here, and to my surprise, I was pretty happy about it, but shouldn't have been. The office would bring in donuts every Friday, and I have a hard time saying no to free stuff.
Where's Dad tonight?
He's still at the all-you-can-eat buffet place in the mall.
How long has he been there?
Since 1979.
And free food, especially something sweet, is my weakness. So I started a lot of my Fridays by grabbing a donut because they were there. They were provided in the break room for free, and they were there for me. Why would I say no to that? And there were other opportunities where free food was provided and there was typically a dessert, and I wasn't saying no very well. I knew better. I knew I should say no. I knew I should eat in moderation a little bit better, but I lacked the willpower. I don't even think it was a discipline issue. I'm very disciplined in other areas of my life. Why can't I say no here? Well, to make a difference, to improve my willpower in this situation, I decided I would go on a diet. I had a friend who encouraged me to do this. It was a paleo diet. They sent me a 30-day diet challenge. And in there, you say no to a lot in the paleo diet. And I figured, though, if it was just for 30 days, I could do it. I ended up building some good habits that came out of that diet, but it didn't stop me from saying yes to free food forever. I did successfully say no to all desserts and anything that violated the paleo diet for those 30 days because I knew that my no was temporary. But the moment those 30 days were over and the promise that I made to myself had ended, I relapsed hard. There were these free little fruit tart things and donuts, and I made up for the fact that I was missing out for the last 30 days. If I lost any weight during that diet challenge, I gained it all back in that first week. In essence, shortly after succeeding for 30 days, I fell back and failed again, but I did learn from this failure. We'll get to what I learned in a little bit, but before we do, it reminded me also of a time that I struggled with an addiction to social media. This was as I was in school and trying to study for tests and do homework. I kept getting distracted with my phone. I had, in particular, just joined Facebook, and I kept opening the Facebook app in between doing tasks and would scroll, and 5 minutes turns into 10, turns to an hour, and you're just spending a whole bunch of time on social media. I remember spending so much time on the Facebook app. I would get bored scrolling through Facebook. So I'd close the app, try to find another app to go to, get bored looking for another app, and default going back to the Facebook app because that was my lizard brain reaction to being bored. And this was preventing me from being the student that I wanted to be. Eventually, I realized that in order to break the cycle here, I had to simply delete the app. This is also what I ended up doing with Angry Birds. That was a similar problem around the same time. I deleted both apps. I actually talked about the Angry Birds thing in a past podcast. And here's the thing. I could go to the App Store and re-download the Facebook app. No problem. I could also go to the browser, the little Safari browser on my phone, and log into Facebook there, even have it remember my login. But the browser interface on a phone for Facebook is miserable. I think they make it bad on purpose to make the app look all the more enticing. The app, from what I remember, was great, but I haven't had the app in a long time because I deleted it. And I've, other than a few times when I felt it was necessary for finding something on Marketplace, have kept it off my phone. And my problem went away. I removed the addiction from my proximity, changing my situation. And, it wasn't that it was completely gone. I could always get it back again. But that bit of friction took a lot more intentional steps to get to Facebook on my phone, and it was enough to deter me from just acting out automatically when I got bored, and I became a better student because of it. And ultimately, this is how I broke my donut habit, and it wasn't something of my choice. You see, 2020 happened, and I started working from home, and there are no free donuts at home. There is no free breakfast at home. So, in essence, I didn't feel like I had a donut addiction where Friday would roll around and I'm like, I have to go buy my donut because I'm used to having a donut on Fridays. No, it was the free availability and proximity of it. As soon as it just wasn't there, the habit was immediately broken. And I no longer struggled with saying yes to the free food as soon as the free food was gone. So, what did I learn from this? I learned that I cannot willpower my way through breaking particular bad habits or finding success where I repeatedly would relapse or repeatedly fail. And if you feel like in your financial journey you are getting started, falling back, either on bad habits or life happens, and you go back to square one, you got to get motivated and you start again. I want to leave you with some hope. If we keep doing the same thing over and over again, just simply trying harder, do better, and we get the same result, that's insanity. What we need to do is learn from our failures, because from the failures come
The roses of success. Success!
And don't just take my word for it. Thomas Edison has attributed this quote: I never once failed at making a light bulb. I just found out 99 ways not to make one. In essence, Thomas Edison had a mentality that he wasn't failing. See, when we fail over and over and we learn from our mistakes, we're not actually failing. We are learning how not to succeed. Depending on how you define failure, those who are wild successes like Thomas Edison got very good at failing or learning how not to succeed before they found their true success. Now, to drive these lessons home, I want to share with you an Improvement Pill YouTube video where he talks about failing over and over and how to break the cycle.
Oftentimes when we fail, we blame it on ourselves. We wonder why we're so pathetic, so weak, so incapable of getting things done, and over time, we start to think that maybe we're destined to fail for the rest of our lives.
And this here is the mentality that we need to avoid so that we stay out of a vicious cycle, thinking that we're not good enough, thinking that we simply need to pour enough willpower into something in order to make it succeed, and that we lack the talent to do that.
What you currently have is a belief that it's your fault for failing, and what's dangerous about this belief is that it often sends us into depressive downward spirals where we feel like something is wrong with us deep down inside. Like maybe we're broken, maybe we're destined to be a loser for the rest of our lives, all of which cause us to turn to our bad habits more as a way to cope, which causes us to fail even more.
I think this is a good point to pause and mention that in the first episode where I started walking through the HopeFilled Financial FootSteps, when I covered HopeFilled Financial FootStep number 1, I talked about how $1,000 may not be enough for a starter emergency fund for you, that you need enough money to stay off the mild, moderate emergencies that are likely to pop up in a year or two's time. Because if you run into a handful of them and they wipe out your starter emergency fund and you have to add more debt, and your goal is to get out of debt, well, it's just going to make you feel like you failed over and over and over and encourage you to fall into this vicious cycle of feeling like a failure when it's really not your fault. The problem, if that was the circumstance, is that you didn't have enough of a buffer to separate you from adding more debt to your life because stuff happens.
If you want to break out of this loop and start seeing progress in your life, then you must replace this current belief that you have with a more constructive one that will empower you and help you succeed even when you mess up. And that's what I want to do today.
There are two main takeaways from the video so far. One is we need to change our mindset to something that's a little bit more positive, optimistic, something that's hope-filled. And we need to make sure that we're approaching our next steps with a strategy that is designed to help us succeed in ways we have not tried before, in ways that helps us learn from our past mistakes and succeed the next time round.
You see, it's usually not a question of whether or not you are mentally strong enough. It's usually a question of whether or not your strategy is effective enough. It's a question of how you do things. You must apply the same sort of thinking to all of the areas in your life where you're currently struggling. Yes, willpower and motivation do play a role, but your strategy is equally, if not more important, when it comes to long-term success.
And I think the key there is long term. I was able to find an approach where my willpower was increased, but only for a temporary amount of time. And it was increased because I realized in my soul that it was temporary. For something to stick long term, we need to have a long term approach. And I think this is why diets get a bad reputation.
If you're someone who can't seem to focus on studying when you're at home, then play around with different locations, the length of time of which you study, the time of day you study, who you study with, and even what you study, if that's even an option.
Ultimately, what I'm seeing from this part of the video is that we need to try different things. And sometimes we're going to try something that doesn't work. We learn from that and try something different.
Try out multiple things so you can figure out which strategies seem to produce the best results. Once that happens, stop looking around for something new and just stick to what seems to be working. An additional tip to help you think about strategies is to ask yourself the following question: how can I increase my chances of success without having to rely on more willpower?
That reminds me a lot of the Veritasium video that we covered at the start of the year, where Derek said that willpower is a finite resource, and those who are successful figure out how to reduce their need to exercise willpower. I think we need to learn from multiple individuals who have been successful before us and what it is that they recommend to find success, especially when it comes to personal finances.
And remember, it's not a question of why you're not mentally strong enough. It's a question of whether or not your strategy is good enough.
And I think that's where we're going to leave the video. I want to say that when I was writing the HopeFilled Financial FootSteps, I didn't want to just set up a strategy that took the wisdoms from others who, quite frankly, have been doing this longer than me. I wanted to also try to structure it in a way that helped optimize your motivation, that helped minimize the failures that would make you feel like there was a massive setback. I wanted to help develop a new system that helps you feel like you have genuinely taken control for the long run. And I think that's a good opportunity to segue into the main topic where we discuss HopeFilled Financial FootStep number 2, take control. In essence, HopeFilled Financial FootStep number 2 is what comes between saving your starter emergency fund and really focusing on paying off debt. It doesn't necessarily need to delay your paying off debt, but I want to emphasize that there should be a focus on the following: learning how to budget so that you have a good strategy for controlling your money, updating your insurance so you defer any risk that you can't take on yourself, and possibly find some savings that will help you pay more on your debt. Stop adding more debt. If the path to a hope-filled financial future involves getting out of consumer debt, it's counterproductive to add more while we're working on this step. Next, don't go alone. The path to hope-filled financial success is not necessarily easy. I cannot emphasize how much harder it is if you try to do this alone. Lastly, begin your plan with the end in mind and understand what is motivating you to complete the journey for your hope-filled financial future. In HopeFilled Financial FootStep number 1, we talked about saving a starter emergency fund. A starter emergency fund that is less than a full 3 to 6 months of expenses if you have consumer debt. Reason being is it takes a while to save up a fully funded emergency fund, and we don't want to delay paying off our debt too long because interest is racking up and is going to put us further and further behind if we delay. That's why in the first step, we save up enough to stay off the ankle biters as fast as possible. The starter emergency fund is a very nice beginning foundation that helps us take care of the littlest things that can trip us up and make us feel like we failed, make us feel like we're not going to succeed in the long run. But we need to set up an even better foundation so that as we move forward, we are very likely to succeed. We need a strategy that is structured to help us win. When it comes to making goals that actually succeed, I think one of the best tips I've ever gotten is to make sure that that goal is written down. And when it comes to a plan that is designed to succeed, we need to be able to write that plan down. We need to have a game plan for our money. And having a regular game plan for our money month to month takes practice. And it's something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to all of us. Having a written plan for your money oftentimes is called a budget. Don't get scared by the word budget there. What we're trying to do is simply have a written plan that we can follow. Now, I'm not going to go into budgeting in depth in this episode. That's something that I've done before in an episode that I'll link in the description below. But it is important to have a written game plan for our money. If we do not have a written plan for what we're going to be doing each month, how do we know whether or not a decision is going to throw us off track? How do we know to say no to an impulse whim? Well, we don't unless we've assigned every dollar a mission. So the first thing we need to start doing in HopeFilled Financial FootStep number 2 to take control is have a written plan, have a budget. Now stick with me here. If you've tried budgeting before and it didn't feel like something that worked for you, I've got a question. Do you have a credit card? Because here's the thing. If you've tried budgeting before and it just didn't seem to work, it didn't seem to allow you to have control, well, maybe we need to change a circumstance around that. A good majority of us don't keep a budget. We don't keep a written budget, that is. You might say you have a budget, but if it's all up here, it's not a written plan. And I want you to have a written plan. I think it's a powerful way to take control. Having a credit card naturally disincentivizes us from managing our money in a way that we know what it's doing every month. Think about it. If you didn't have a tool that allowed you to pay back money later, and if you didn't have the money this month, it's okay because it just carries over as a balance and you get to it when you get to it. If you didn't have that tool, if that was taken away from you, what pressure would you feel? For me, I would feel like the hair on my neck standing up, like, oh no, like, if I don't have a credit card to use, I need to know where my money's going and I need to know when and I need to know why. I need to know how. And I need to, how much is in my bank account now? I don't want to overdraft. So removing a credit card or all the credit cards from the situation here invites a natural pressure. If you feel like it's scary to do that, well, you're experiencing the natural pressure to have a written plan for your money, the natural plan to prevent overdrafts, the natural plan to make sure that you're not outspending your income. Let's face it, the credit card is the one tool that naturally enables us to easily, with almost no friction, outspend our income. So I urge you in this step, if you're going to try budgeting and it's not worked out for you before, take your credit cards and do a little bit of a challenge with them, at least until you're out of debt. A temporary thing. You can do this. You can exercise a little bit of willpower for a temporary challenge. I want you to get a little Tupperware, put your credit cards in it, all of them. Fill it about halfway up with water and pop it in the freezer. What you're doing is you're locking your credit cards in a block of ice to, if you actually really, really genuinely needed them to cover one of your four walls, you could go and thaw that little block of ice out and you could take care of the emergency that necessitates you go deeper into debt. But you're probably not going to want to go and thaw that block of ice out to get to the credit card so you can go to the movies when it wasn't in the budget. And keep in mind that if you're going to accept the credit card freeze challenge, you're going to want to delete the digital memory from your browsers and e-commerce websites and your phone that just knows your credit card number. That way you're not tempted to use your credit card through those means. I see you. And after you do this, you can try to engage with the budget again, this time with a natural pressure that's going to encourage you to stick to it. And I want you to give yourself the grace to try this budgeting thing for at least 3 months before you make a determination to yourself how much you do and do not like it. Now, as you're running your budget, you might realize that there's not as much wiggle room in there as you want. You would like to free up more of your income. That way we have more money to use against the debt in the next HopeFilled Financial FootStep. And the second part of taking control works with that and helps us defer risk that we can't afford to have now. Insurance is a tool that allows us to defer risk that we can't afford to take on now. And there are insurance products that are essential for almost everybody here listening. And then there are insurance products that are once or redundant to something that is a necessity. For example, you could get insurance for cancer, but if your health insurance would cover you for cancer, then why do you need cancer insurance on top of it? Or here's another example, accidental death and dismemberment insurance. If you die due to an accident or dismemberment, does that mean that your family needs to have more money than if you died by other means? In that circumstance, you're not double dead and your family doesn't need to have double coverage on you for those purposes. So we can evaluate our insurance situation, learn a little bit about insurance, shop around a little bit, see if we can get something with a lower premium but isn't exposing us to undue risk. Make sure that we're covered. And hopefully, through this exercise, we can trim out a little bit more room in the budget so that we can apply more power to knocking out the debt. Okay, so here's where we are with building our foundation. We have a little bit of money that gives us a little bit of a buffer between anything that might happen to us and falling back into debt. We've updated our insurance to defer risk that we can't afford and hopefully shop around and trim up a little bit more room in our budget. With this taken care of, we're almost ready to tackle our debt, but we need to commit to not adding any more debt to the pile. If we want to get out of debt, adding more debt to our situation is simply counterproductive. And we need to recognize what tools have enabled us to add more debt to the pile easily. I've already mentioned freezing credit cards. I think that's a great way to prevent you from adding more debt through a credit card, but those aren't the only things you need to be on the lookout for. I'll describe it as a competitor to the credit card, but a buy now, pay later service is an easy way for you to add more debt to the pile when something's not in the budget. And you need to simply commit yourself to not using such a tool while you're trying to pay off your debts. And that can be really hard, but that's where the budget does indeed help you. If you don't write something into the budget for this month, and you don't feel like you can go back and add it in without compromising either your progress in paying off debt or one of your four walls, one of your needs, housing, food, utilities, or transportation, well, you simply have to tell yourself no. The budget is going to give you the actual evidence to say no. And right now I want to say, if you're worried about doing a budget because you're concerned you're going to have to tell yourself no more often, well, you're simply recognizing that at the moment you're outspending your income as it is, and you're worried about making a change to be more responsible. I want you to think about that and let it sink in as we cover the last 2 points for taking control with your money. The next one is going to be don't go alone.
It's dangerous to go alone. Take this.
It can be very challenging to accomplish any major goal in a vacuum without a community, without someone to hold us accountable. So if you're married, you got to make sure that your spouse is on board. You got to talk through your plan and strategy and do this arm in arm. Do it together so that you can be walking toward a common hope-filled financial future and hold each other accountable to the steps. And if you're not married, you need to have someone in your life that you're comfortable talking with about money, about personal finances, someone who may be going on the journey alongside you in their own way, so you can hold each other accountable. If you know that someone's going to ask you if you stuck to your budget, if you know that someone is going to ask you, hey, which step are you on? Or are you on pace with your plan, with your goals? Well, you're going to be much more likely to keep them. You're going to be much more likely to keep a promise that you've made to yourself and that you've made publicly known to someone else whom you trust. They're going to be, through accountability, there to catch you when you feel like you're falling and getting ready to fail. All right, that builds a beautiful foundation for the rest of the HopeFilled Financial FootSteps, with one exception, and that is going to be your personal motivation. What is it that currently, right now, is driving you to want to make a change? If you've made it to this point in the podcast, I know that you want to make a change in your future. You've listened to me talk about all sorts of different stories. You've listened to me talk about budgets in the abstract. Something is driving you. Can you write down what that thing is now? Why do you want to take control of your money? Why do you want to get out of debt? Why do you want to have a healthy nest egg for the future? And you might have multiple reasons. Some of us don't want to be a burden on our family when we retire. Some of us want to be financially stable, breaking the paycheck to paycheck cycle so we can start a family. And your why can go incredibly deep. I could go through countless examples, but I think you know what your whys are. Can you write them down today as a part of taking control? If you were to look forward in the HopeFilled Financial FootSteps, all the way to HopeFilled Financial FootStep number 8, that's when you get to live your dream. What is the dream at the other side of financial independence, on the other side of having ultimate control over your money? Being able to work because you want to, not because you have to. What is it that you would do if you didn't have to work to earn money? Well, write that dream down and make that be part of your why. Begin this plan with the end in mind. Put that thing on your fridge. Put that thing on your bathroom mirror. What is your end goal? What is your dream? What is your why? And let that drive you so that if you run into cracks in the foundation as you're building it in this step, as you're getting ready to pay off debt, and as you're getting ready to embark on an epic journey for hope-filled financial success, let this motivation be there. Let this why help you take control and drive you beyond. And if you feel comfortable sharing what your why is, what your motivation is, what your dream is, please share it in the comments below if you're listening on a platform with a comment section. I would love to see it, and I know others can be inspired by your dream. And with that, until next week, until next Tuesday, budget bravely and enjoy your hope-filled financial future. Enjoy your dream.